A teenager's few words can silence a room, stop the world in its tracks, and change lives. It was the kind of moment that could not have been scripted, yet it unfolded before millions of eyes on a sunny afternoon. The studio lights glared down as Steve Harvey's microphone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. The metallic clang echoed like a gunshot in the silence that followed. For a brief moment, everything on Family Feud came to a halt, as Steve Harvey, with over 30 years of television experience, found himself utterly unprepared for what he had just heard. His voice cracked, the audience held its breath, and the camera kept rolling. But in that moment, Steve wasn't the host anymore. He became a man who understood that some things, some moments, are far bigger than television. This wasn't the ordinary fast-paced energy of Family Feud, with its quick wit, loud laughs, and competitive fire. This was something different. In a studio full of bright lights, a frozen audience of 300 people, and the hum of cameras rolling, Marcus Thompson, a 17-year-old teenager, stood at the podium, his expression unreadable. It was a moment that would stop the show, break protocol, and change everyone who witnessed it forever. But how did we get to this point? How did we get to a moment so profound, so raw, that the game show host himself had to stop and reflect? To understand this, we need to go back. Not just to that moment on the Family Feud stage, but to the beginning of Marcus Thompson's story. 3 weeks before the show aired, the Thompson family had received the call that every Family Feud hopeful dreams of. After months of auditions, background checks, and all the right answers to the survey questions, they had been selected to appear on the show. It was supposed to be their big break, the opportunity that could change their lives. The Thompsons were not wealthy, far from it. They lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit, scraping by on Dorothy Thompson's fixed income and whatever odd jobs the adults in the family could get their hands on. Dorothy Thompson, at 73, was the family's backbone. She had raised Marcus after his parents died in a tragic car accident when he was just 8 years old. Despite her ongoing battle with diabetes and working 2 part-time jobs just to keep them afloat, Dorothy never let Marcus see her struggle. She had a kind of magic about her, a way of making things work, even when there didn't seem to be enough. Coupons, prayers, and sheer determination were her tools, and they kept her family going. For Marcus, Grandma Dorothy was invincible. She was the woman who had made countless sacrifices so he could have a better life, and despite all the hardships, she never complained. To him, she was a superhero. When the call came that they had been selected for Family Feud, it felt like a gift from the heavens. The $20,000 prize could change everything. It could pay for Dorothy's medication, cover Marcus's college application fees, and maybe, just maybe, allow them to move to a safer, better neighborhood. It was a chance they could not afford to miss. For weeks, they practiced together. Dorothy coaching Marcus on the answers while Marcus helped her with the buzzer timing. They were ready. Or so they thought. On the morning of their scheduled taping, everything changed. Dorothy woke up dizzy, disoriented. Her blood sugar had spiked dangerously during the night, and by the time Marcus found her, she was barely conscious. The paramedics rushed her to Detroit Medical Center, where doctors worked to stabilize her condition, but they insisted she stay for observation. It was a cruel twist of fate, and Marcus, devastated, didn't know what to do. How could he go on the show while his grandmother, the woman who had made all this possible, lay in a hospital bed? But Dorothy, even in her weakened state, was as stubborn as ever. "You have to go," she whispered to Marcus from her hospital bed, her voice barely audible but filled with determination. "This is our shot, baby. You have to go." Marcus protested. This wasn't just a game to him. It was everything they had worked for. How could he leave her? But Dorothy, with her usual grace, had already taken action. She had contacted the show's producers, explained the situation, and convinced them to let Marcus represent the family. It was highly unusual for a teenager to compete alone, but the producers, moved by their story, agreed. So despite everything, Marcus stepped onto the Family Feud stage that afternoon, feeling the weight of the world on his young shoulders. The studio lights were blinding, the noise of the audience deafening. Steve Harvey, with his perfectly tailored suit and effortless charm, seemed larger than life. But Marcus wasn't there for fame or the glory. He was there for Dorothy, the woman who had raised him, who had worked tirelessly so he could have a better future. The Thompsons weren't the fastest or the funniest family on the show, but they were determined. They fought through every round, answering questions and earning points. And Marcus, who had surprised everyone with his quick thinking and maturity, was quickly becoming the standout of the team. When Steve asked, "What do people do when they're nervous?" Marcus confidently answered, "Pray," earning the number 2 spot on the board, a smile from Steve, and applause from the audience. But it was during the fast money round that everything changed. The fast money round was the climax of the game. 2 family members answered 5 survey questions, trying to accumulate enough points to win the grand prize of $20,000. Marcus's aunt had already scored a respectable 146 points, leaving Marcus with the task of getting just 54 more points to secure the win. The pressure was on. Steve's voice was filled with his usual energy. "All right, Marcus, you need 54 points to win $20,000 for your family. You ready, young man?" Marcus nodded, gripping the podium so tightly his knuckles went white. The questions began. "Name something people do when they're happy." "Dance," Marcus answered quickly. "Name something you might find in a teenager's bedroom." "Clothes," Marcus said, and the audience laughed. "Name something that makes noise." "Music." Then the next question came. "Name something people save money for." Marcus hesitated. His answer was delayed by a moment of quiet reflection, and in that pause, something shifted. His face softened, and his expression became almost somber. "Family?" he whispered, almost too quietly for the mic to pick up. Steve's eyebrows raised in surprise. It was an unusual answer, especially coming from a teenager. Most of the kids his age would have said a car, or video games, or college. But family? That was something different. Steve paused. He'd been hosting for years, and in all that time, he'd heard every answer under the sun. But something in Marcus's response, something in his eyes, stopped him. He leaned forward, his voice shifting from the playful tone he usually used to something softer, more concerned. "You okay, son?" Marcus looked up at Steve, and for the first time since the cameras started rolling, his composure cracked. His eyes filled with tears, but he quickly wiped them away, trying to hold it together. "Name something that makes life worth living?" Steve asked, his voice tender, as if he knew the weight of the moment. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He stared at Steve for a long time, and in the silence that fell across the studio, the audience seemed to hold its collective breath. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus spoke, and his voice was barely above a whisper. But in that moment, every word seemed to carry across the room like a thunderclap. "Being with the people you love while you still can," he said, his words hanging in the air like a prayer. For a moment, No one moved. The entire studio was still. Even the audience, usually quick to respond with applause, sat frozen, moved by the depth of Marcus's answer. Steve's mouth fell open, his usual confident demeanor momentarily lost. He had heard thousands of answers in his time, but this one was different. This was not just a game show response. It was a truth, raw and real, and it left Steve speechless. After a long pause, Steve set down his cards. He stepped closer to Marcus, looking him in the eye, and spoke softly. "Son," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "That's not just a good answer. That's the answer." But Marcus wasn't finished. The words began to spill out, unbidden, as if he had been holding them back for weeks. "My grandma raised me," he said, his voice growing stronger now. "She's in the hospital right now, and I don't know how much time we have left. She sacrificed everything for me. She worked 2 jobs. She went without food so I could eat. She never bought herself anything so I could have school supplies. And all she wanted was for us to be on this show together." The camera operators, who had filmed hundreds of shows, found themselves wiping their eyes. Even the producers, usually concerned with timing and ratings, were reaching for tissues. "She's watching right now from her hospital bed," Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on the camera. "And I just want her to know that everything she taught me, everything she sacrificed, it was worth it. She made my life worth living." Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He walked around the podium, pulled Marcus into a hug, one that went beyond what anyone had seen on a game show set before. It wasn't a quick hug for the cameras. It was a fatherly embrace, the kind of hug that says, "I see you, I understand you, you are not alone." "Son," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "your grandmother didn't just raise a good young man, she raised a champion." The audience, moved by the moment, erupted into applause. It wasn't the typical clapping of a game show. It was the kind of applause that recognizes something sacred, something real, something that goes beyond the game. Still holding Marcus, Steve turned toward the camera and said, his voice filled with gravity, "Ladies and gentlemen, this young man just reminded us what Family Feud is really about. It's not about the money. It's not about the prizes. It's about family. It's about love. It's about the people who shape us, who sacrifice for us, who make our lives worth living." Reaching into his jacket pocket, Steve pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. "Marcus," he said, "I want you to have this, not because you're a contestant, but because you're exactly the kind of young man this world needs. Your grandmother didn't just raise you, she raised a leader." Marcus took the card with trembling hands. It was more than just paper. It was recognition. It was validation. It was a symbol of everything he had fought for. As the points were revealed, it was clear. Marcus had earned enough points to win the $20,000 prize. But that moment, the hug, the words, the raw honesty, was the real victory. What mattered was the message that had just been sent. Love is what makes life worth living. Family is worth any sacrifice. And sometimes, the most profound truths come from the mouths of those who have lived them. But that wasn't the end of the story. As the celebration began, Steve Harvey made another unprecedented move. He walked off the set, still in the middle of taping, and went straight to the production office. "Get Dorothy Thompson on the phone," he told them, "right now." Within minutes, they connected Marcus's grandmother in her hospital room. Steve took the phone and spoke directly to Dorothy. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I just met your grandson, and I need you to know something. You didn't just raise a good kid. You raised someone special. someone who just taught an entire studio and everyone watching at home what really matters in life. Through the phone, Dorothy cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming pride. Her sacrifice had been recognized. Her boy had succeeded. Steve wasn't finished. We're going to make sure you get the medical care you need. And Marcus, we're going to make sure you get to college. Because what happened here today, this is not just television. It's a reminder of what's important. In the months that followed, Steve's gesture had a ripple effect far beyond that one episode. The business card he gave Marcus became a symbol of mentorship, a promise that was kept. Steve's foundation helped cover Dorothy's medical expenses, ensuring she received the specialized care she needed. They also set up a scholarship fund in Dorothy's name, not just for Marcus, but for other young people like him who had overcome adversity through the love and sacrifice of their families. Marcus went on to graduate as valedictorian, delivering his speech to a packed auditorium. Being with the people you love while you still can, he began, looking directly at Dorothy, who was beaming with pride in the front row. Steve Harvey, forever changed by that moment, began sharing Marcus's message in his speaking engagements and books. The episode, which aired 6 months later, became one of the most watched in Family Feud history. Not because of the drama or the money, but because viewers saw something real, something human. The business card Steve gave Marcus still sits framed in Marcus's dorm room at Michigan State University. It's not just a card, it's a reminder of everything that happened that day. And for Marcus, it represents a promise that he will one day pass on.